On today's show, the Atlanta Hawks end 2023 with a road win in Washington, D.C. on this New Year's Eve. We'll talk about all of what transpired in a streak-busting victory for the Hawks, and we'll get into all of that right now.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1621 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on New Year's Eve here in the evening of New Year's Eve. And today's show is brought to you by the folks at FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more with FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Also want to encourage you at the top of the podcast, as I always do, to make us your first listen each and every day. Please check out the podcast anywhere you get your podcasts, places like Apple and Spotify and Overcast on the audio side, as well as YouTube on the video side. And today's show will focus on what became a 130-126 win for the Hawks on the road in D.C. over the Wizards. It was a wild one. I know a lot of people probably missed this game. It's a Sunday afternoon. It's a holiday. There's NFL on, all that fun stuff. And for the first 3.75 quarters for the Hawks, it was pretty good on the whole. And then at the very end, it got very tight in a way that was not comfortable for anyone. But in the end, the Hawks stop their 4-game losing streak in notable and much needed fashion, I would say, to end the 2023 calendar year. They're now 3-0 this year against the Wizards, their best mark against any team in the league so far. They're also a very, very solid 9-10 on the road. Now, the home record, not great, but the road record's been pretty good. A lot of teams would like to be 9-10 on the road this year. The Hawks trailed by 13 out of the gate in this one, kind of a hangover from the bad loss on Friday, which I talked about, by the way, extensively on this podcast. And I talk about the Hawks all the time on this show, so please subscribe and check it out, as well as that podcast that was kind of painful to record on Friday evening. But after that, they flipped the script a little bit with a great second quarter to go up by 12. By halftime, they kind of held serve in the third, and for the most part, this game felt like it was kind of over in the last few minutes until the very, very end. In the end, it was not a total breeze at all down the stretch, but a big second half from Trae Young and Dejounte Murray to kind of put the game away, and the Hawks escape Washington, D.C. with a victory to end the year on a high note. So now we'll kind of go broadly with what I saw in this game, and then we'll sort of dive in as we get going on this podcast about the rest of the nuts and bolts of this one. For some context, though, the Hawks were down another guy that's important in this game. Onyeka Okongwu missed the game with illness. He was listed as doubtful and then did not play. No surprise, since he was listed as doubtful, they didn't play. But that left the Hawks without two of their top 7-ish players, with DeAndre Hunter still out, as well as Okongwu, whereas the Wizards were largely at full strength, other than old pal Danilo Gallinari, who doesn't play a ton for them anyway. Man, this is pretty wild. The Hawks managed to not cover the spread in this game. I know some people don't really care about that, and I do understand that, but it's good context in that the Hawks are now 7-25 against the spread this year. That's impossibly bad, worst mark in the league. But they were favored in this game by 6.5 points. They led by that many for the vast majority of the game until the very end. But anyway, offensively, they got it done in this matchup after the well-chronicled struggles on Friday in the second half, which I talked about ad nauseum on the show on Friday night. And look, this was a pretty good matchup for the Hawks offense. The Wizards are not good defensively. They're bottom 5 in the league in defense and all kinds of stuff on the defensive end of the floor. But the Hawks had a 121 offensive rating in this game, which is very good. And they did it while missing 13 free throws, which is uncharacteristic of this Hawks team. The Hawks came into the night shooting 83% from the line as a team, which is number 3 in the league. That's an excellent mark. In this game, they shot 65% from the free throw line. If they had just shot their normal baseline in this game from the line, they would have scored 7 more points, and they would have won this game pretty comfortably. So that's not the entire story, but certainly it's pretty good that the Hawks were able to score at this level while missing this many free throws, because you would normally bank on that being a shot that nobody really affects other than yourself. Anyway, a good offensive game on the whole for Atlanta. I'll come back to that later on as we might talk about the end of the game. But the Hawks did shoot well from the floor. 50% from the field in this game, 38% from 3, only 12 turnovers, which is already a good mark. And I think they had 4 in the first 3 minutes. So they had 8 turnovers in the last 44 minutes of the game. That's a very, very good ball security mark. They got to the line a ton in this one. There was some garbage time in there, but even when you factor that in, they got to the line 37 times. Even if you kind of remove the garbage time free throw attempts. They still got to the line like 30-ish times, which is pretty good. They had 20-second chance points, which is an excellent figure. 12 offensive rebounds for the Hawks, led by a bunch from Clint Capella, 7, I believe, just from him alone. They had 5 guys with at least 24 points. No, sorry, 4 guys with 3 guys with at least 24 points, 5 guys in double figures in this game for Atlanta. They had all kinds of depth, but a career high from Jalen Johnson in this one. That's certainly worth noting with 24 points. And then 72 combined from Trey and Dejounte, including 35 in the second half, where the Hawks have kind of been notably faltering in recent days, especially Dejounte, who's had some really bad second halves recently. That was not the case in this game. He and Trey were both very good in this one offensively, which is usually a good sign for the Hawks offense. So it was not perfect by any means for the offense, but even at the end, and Quinn talked about this at the end of the game as well, it really wasn't the offense at all down the stretch. The only thing that they kind of did wrong on offense, quote unquote, at the end was miss free throws, which isn't a process failure. It's just just miss shots. So I think offensively, it was an encouraging day for the Hawks. Even when they were winning, they didn't kind of get so super stagnant. They made shots. They were able to kind of create good looks for the most part in the second half, and certainly a passing grade on the offensive end of the floor. Defensively, it's kind of nuanced here because in the first 3 quarters, they had a 106 defensive rating, and they were still kind of in that range until like 4 minutes to go. And then things flew off the rails at the very end of this game. Post-game, Quinn talked extensively about this. I thought about clipping this audio to play for in the podcast, but it was too long to kind of play in realistic fashion here. But he talked about how it kind of wasn't the same. I know it might feel the same as the Hawks kind of blowing a lead, quote unquote, late in this game, but it wasn't really the same style of that as kind of the way that Quinn talked about it. And I think he's right in that it really wasn't like the course of normal play. In the previous games, the Hawks have been, of course, blowing double-digit leads in the second half every night, it seems, including most notably on Friday. But in this game, they were up comfortably, like 15 with like 2.5 minutes to go. And it was that total like scramble garbage time that kind of beat them in this game. But defensively, and this is also on film, not just from what Quinn said, but I definitely saw this in real time, the communication and the execution were very bad at the end of the game. Again, none of that would have mattered if the Hawks just simply made a free throw or two down the stretch, but defensively, they give up. I mean, some of that is that in certain situations, you don't mind giving up a pretty open layup when you're up 7 with a minute to go. Like that's not. But the problem was they weren't taking anything away. They were allowing threes, they were allowing layups. Jalen had a rough night defensively. Clint had some bad moments at the end of this game. It was kind of a team-wide effort of badness defensively at the end of the game. But all that said, the rest of the game is pretty good. And even if you grade on a curve a little bit, they had a 115 defensive rating. That's not great, but it isn't bad given where the Hawks are defensively. That's an above-average mark for where they are this season. They dominated the glass. That definitely helped in this game. When you factor in free throws, it got to be pretty lopsided. The Hawks actually had, I think it was like an extra 5 or 6 possessions shooting-wise in this game, which is not a ton, but certainly helps on the margins. They got to the line a ton, and also did not allow the Wizards to get to the line a lot in this game. They didn't force turnovers a lot, only 9, but the Wizards kind of shot the ball at like a pretty league average kind of level. The one problem, other than the very end of the game defensively, that I would certainly note was transition. The Hawks were pretty rough in terms of stopping the Wizards from getting out and pushing. Quinn noted that too, like the Wizards, especially early on when the Hawks were down at the first quarter of this game, they were able to get a lot of like pretty clean looks, not only just fast breaks, but certainly in that sort of semi-transition mode. And that's been a weakness of the Hawks this year on the whole. That was a little bit shaky in this game, but I actually think it was pretty good defensively most of the game. And then if you want to say they gave all that goodwill back at the end, I would not blame you because it certainly was the case at the very end. But even when you factor in the sort of downturn the last 3 minutes of the game, they were pretty decent defensively in this one. They weren't great, but at least respectable. And I think defensively they've been kind of, I don't want to say turning the corner, that would be way too strong, but they've been okay-ish in recent days. And if they just played offense pretty well in the second half on Friday, it'd be a different mood right now. But anyway, long story short, a win is a win is a win. You know, some of this is coach speak, but Quinn did give the line of the any win in the NBA is a good win. The Hawks pushed the limit on that one today, I have to say. This is, you know, it wasn't like a super satisfying victory, but given the way these previous 4 games had gone, the Hawks just getting to the finish line and winning this game. And look, I don't want to paint a terrible picture, but if the Hawks had lost this game, especially with a 15-point lead with like 2.5 minutes to go, and we'll touch on it later with some more detail, they were in some level of danger at the very end of this game. If they had lost this game, I don't even want to think about how bad the takes and the tones and all that stuff would have been. It would have been dire and rightfully so. So they avoid all that, positively. They get a win on the road, and nothing's ever assured in the NBA. So getting out of there with a victory is a positive sign. We'll talk about all of what transpired in this game when it comes to the nuts and bolts and my observations and play-by-play stuff. We're getting all that as well as my player-by-player evaluations at the end of the podcast. But first, a word from our friends on the show. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, and the NFL regular season is wrapping up right now, but it's still time to get on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, if you're a new customer, get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet at FanDuel. That's $150 right now in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel Sportsbook app is so easy to use, and there are so many different ways to bet over at FanDuel. They have live same-game parlays. You can make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, which is the best way to find popular parlays available at FanDuel. You can also find bets in the new Explore tab at FanDuel, and they have all of the customary point spreads, over-unders, money lines, player props, future bets, and much more. The FanDuel app is also safe and secure. They cover the entire range of sports at FanDuel as well. That includes the NFL and the NBA, of course, but college football, college basketball, MLB, WNBA, college baseball, even when it's in season, golf, tennis, soccer, auto racing, boxing, MMA, and much more. And they also have all the angles on the Hawks they're looking for. They have player award futures. They have a full slate of offerings coming up for the Hawks' next game on Wednesday against the Thunder. It's all there for you at FanDuel, and now is the best place to sign up and really the best time to sign up with the folks at FanDuel Sportsbook. And the place to go is FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup with FanDuel. FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, let's dig into the kind of the way this game unfolded or transpired along the way on a Sunday afternoon, New Year's Eve edition of the podcast. And unfortunately for the Hawks, the offensive drought from Friday kind of continued at the beginning of this game. They were down 17-4, which kind of feels like it was a lifetime ago. But the Hawks didn't score the first 5 possessions of the game. They were 2 of 12 from the floor with 3 turnovers at the outset. And dating back to the second half, of course, that we'll never talk about again, hopefully, against the Kings on Friday, the Hawks had actually shot 15 of 57, which is 26%, in about 29 minutes of clock time. Second half on Friday and the first 5 minutes of the game on Sunday afternoon. It was pretty rough. But then the defense took over a little bit. They got 6 stops in a row defensively in the middle of the first quarter. The Wizards didn't score for like 3.5 minutes, and the Hawks were not able to kind of cut into the lead a ton, but that kind of stabilized them a little bit along the way. Rotationally, no big surprises. Again, with Okongwu out, it was Bruno Fernando as the backup center in this game. He played about as little as you would have expected in this one. It was the same rotation otherwise that it was on Friday. It was Patty Mills in the rotation for the second game in a row. He played a very, very short stint in the first half and then a couple of very short stints in the second half. A little bit of an odd deployment, but Patty got in there. And then Garrison Matthews was the sort of other, 8th/9th man, 14 minutes for Garrison. And then it was Bogdanovich. So no big surprises, no AJ as he starts to kind of work his way back in. I talked about this a little bit on Friday, but he was active on Friday. He was active again today. But the Hawks did not practice in between games, so I am not surprised at all that AJ did not play here. Now, after this, I think they'll be getting him hopefully closer to being ready to play, and I would certainly start to advocate again for AJ to start playing. But for now, no surprises that he did not play in this game with no practice in between the game on Friday and the game today. Wes Matthews is kind of on the fringes again now. And then Trent Forrest did not play either, with Kobe Buffkin, by the way, still in College Park, and also the injured guys of Hunter, Seth Lundy, and Muhammad Gay remains out as well. As far as like the way this thing stabilized in the first quarter, the big push was at the end of the quarter, a 13-2 run to go actually up by 1 at the very end, with Trey hitting Jalen Johnson for a big dunk. I think he had 3 or 4 of those in this game. Actually, Washington, though, then hit a pretty impossible 3 at the buzzer of the first quarter, with Denny Avdia kind of just like heaving one to go up again. But the Hawks were still only down by 2 after being down by 13 points. They scored 13 points in the last 250 of the first quarter. Trey had 11, and they played pretty well after that slow start. In fact, by the middle of the by the end of the second quarter, I should say, by halftime, they won a 15-minute stretch of this game, 55-33. So the Hawks had lost the first 9 minutes of the game by 10, and then they kind of dominated from there and really flipped the game in their favor. Part of that was a 9-2 run in the middle of the quarter, and the second was Dejounte kind of getting loose a little bit, getting downhill a few times. Also, Jalen had a couple of really good finishes early in the second quarter. 1 or 2 of them were on his own drives, where it's obviously a huge value add to have him be able to attack the rim the way he is capable of doing and finishing at the rim in a way that most guys on the team cannot do. And then also a couple of huge passes from Trey to Jalen for dunks and highlights in this one. They played great in the second quarter on the whole, honestly, to flip the game in their direction. A 42-28 quarter for the Hawks. They scored more than 1.6 points per trip in that second quarter. 9 assists, Just balls really moving. In the first half, Trey, Dejounte, and Jalen had 15 points each or more. Jalen Johnson had probably the best offensive half of his career, I would say. 18 points in the first half for Jalen in this game. And yeah, they held the defensively they held the Wizards down pretty well, in addition to all that offensive firepower. I will say until the very end of the game, their worst defensive stretch was probably early in the third quarter of this game, where the offense kind of lulled there too, and the Wizards scored 23 points in like 5 minutes. That lead got down from 12 down at halftime down to 2, and the vibes were not great at that point in time, given all of the parallels to previous games. But then, to their credit, the Hawks had a 15-3 run, push it back out to 14. Murray had 10 of those 15 points. He was very good in that stretch in the third quarter. A couple drives from him with Gafford off the floor, crucially for the Wizards. He was able to get all the way to the rim a few times, and then hit a 3 off a kickout pass from Trey. Notably, Dejounte played the entire third quarter, and that's a change from usual. And I think smartly, Snyder decided to ride him because it was going well. Quinn has, certainly like most coaches do, has a rotation that they plan to use, roughly at least. But when DeJounte's got it going like that, after the way he struggled in second halves in particular recently, I thought it was a good kind of twist to not take him out there, kind of let him ride, and that was a good sort of adjustment on the fly. They were up 13 after 3 quarters. They had 100 points through 3. How about this stat? They had 4 guys with double-doubles at the end of the third quarter. Trey with assists, of course, plus points, and then the entire front court of Bay, Johnson, and Capella all had 10 rebounds or more in the first 3 quarters. In the fourth, a little bit uneven. Jalen made a 3 I thought was a pretty big shot with like 8.5 minutes to go. He got up by 12. Quinn had a good challenge with 6.5 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. When Trey got called for an offensive foul, when he created some contact in the way that he is adept at doing, it was certainly a defensive foul. Quinn challenged it, won that challenge, and it became 3 free throws. So a very high leverage play from going from a Trey offensive foul to 3 free throws, and that was a big swing. The Wizards, though, started to score. One of the threes they made was a comical banked-in 3 by Kuzma. But I will say, the offense, again, unlike on Friday, the Hawks kept scoring in a way that was pretty impressive in the fourth quarter. Trey scored back-to-back trips, and the Dejounte felt like, hit a shot, I should say, that felt like kind of a dagger, honestly, with like 3 minutes to go. But the Hawks up by 14 points, and it came out of a timeout where Quinn, they had 1 on the shot clock, and Quinn drew up a very nice play. Dejounte got loose and made a 3 to kind of, it seemed like kind of end the game, honestly. And then even right after that, they had another pseudo dagger with Trey hitting a second chance 3 with 2:15 to go up by 15. It should be over at that point in time. Like you're starting to look at the bench for subs at that point in time, but it was not over. Washington kept coming and coming and coming. They got all the way within 5 with 41 seconds to go into a timeout. And the Hawks just kept missing free throws. I won't go through all of this now because I talked about it a little bit earlier. But here are some money stats. At one point, the Wizards scored 17 points across a 7-possession span. So that's about 2.5 points per possession. Do the math on that. That ain't good. Open layups and also open threes. Like I said before, the Hawks just didn't take anything away. I'm fine giving up open layups in certain instances. Obviously, you don't want to do that. But when you're up a lot, it can actually be kind of beneficial to you to give up an open layup, provided you get the ball in bounds. But when you give up open threes and open layups and miss free throws, that's when it starts to get kind of dicey. So it was bad defensively. Even Capella, who's usually a great anchor, some rough moments there. Jalen was weirdly bad in that stretch. Dejounte was absent. Like they were all bad. Everybody was bad, and they were also playing, playing Bay and Bogey and all that stuff, and it was just kind of rough. But the other big stat, other than the defensive possessions, was that the Hawks missed 7 free throws in the final 144 of the game. 7 free throws in less than 2 minutes. This is a team that, again, shoots 83% from the line, and they really only have one bad foul shooter on the team, and it's Capella, and he didn't have any of those misses. You would expect if the Hawks missed 7 free throws in a 2-minute span, you would expect Clint to have at least 2 of those, maybe three or 4 of those. Nope, wasn't Clint. It was Trey, it was Jalen, it was Sadiq, who were all pretty good free throw shooters. Trey's had some weirdness in the fourth quarter recently with free throws. I do think that his free throw shooting might, and I don't want to assign too much to this, it could be kind of related to his shoulder. Trey is dealing with right shoulder issues. He's been on the injury report a few times with his right shoulder. That's a shooting shoulder. Just something to look at there, but no matter what, Trey missed a couple of important ones. Murray split a couple. Jalen split a couple. Bay missed both of his in the final minutes of the game. So I think it's just variance, to be honest, on missed free throws. Again, this is a good free throw shooting team. But the combination of bad defense and bad free throw shooting made it really, really tight. But fortunately, it never got less than 3 down the stretch. And even then, it was like they were down 3 and then immediately got the ball into Dejounte for free throws All he had to do there was make 1 out of 2, and he did. If he misses both those free throws with a minute to go, or a few seconds left in the game, and the Wizards had the ball down 3, it would have gotten real tight. But anyway, I'll be done rambling now. I did say it once before, but they unbelievably managed to not cover the spread in this game, which I know some folks were looking at. I know people don't care about this, but it does kind of tell you that the Hawks have underachieved this year. Against this, I think in general, even if you're not a huge believer in betting lines and all that stuff, the closing line of a major sporting event and a major market is the way I'd put that, is a very accurate representation of the projection of that game. And for the Hawks to fall short of that number in 25 of the 32 games this year is a very plain and direct way to say the Hawks have underachieved. We obviously know that. If you're a Hawks fan that's a diehard, you already knew that. You watch all the games. But even just someone from afar can kind of tell, hey, this is an underachieving team when you're that below the mark on against the spread. Anyway, long story short, the Hawks escaped with the victory. It was not as close as the final score indicated, I have to say. That's my big picture opinion. But the Hawks still made it difficult, and nothing was easy on this particular Sunday afternoon. But anyway, as Quinn said, a win is a win is a win. And we'll talk about the player-by-player stuff in a second. But first, a word from our sponsors on today's show. Today's show is brought to you by the folks at PrizePicks, and PrizePicks is the largest DFS platform in North America and also the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. At PrizePicks, you pick 2 to 6 players and then choose whether they'll have more or less than a certain number of projections in different categories. You can also win up to 25 times the money on your entries at PrizePicks, and they have combo projections that allow you to include 2 or more players from different sports or different leagues, and they have a huge selection of sports not offered anywhere else at PrizePicks, and that includes projections on the NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, PGA, different stat types across the board, and they have all of that in one place. They also have a reboot policy at PrizePicks, and they are the only DFS platform with an injury insurance policy. I've enjoyed checking out PrizePicks for quite some time now. I really love the NBA offerings they have, as well as the NFL stuff that I dig into all the time, and even baseball, when that is in season, is very much fun to sort of track and project at PrizePicks. And on the whole, the experience is fantastic there. It's easy, it's fun, and I recommend it at the highest possible level. And the place to go is prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use promo code LockedOnNBA for a first-time deposit match up to $100. One more time, that is prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use promo code LockedOnNBA for a first-time deposit match up to $100. Check out daily fantasy sports made easy with PrizePicks. All right, to the players in this one. Again, 9 guys played for Atlanta in this game. Patty Mills played at least 8 minutes. Kind of a hilarious stat line for Patty Mills. 0 points, 0 of 1 from the floor. So Patty's actually taken only 2 shots in the last 2 games while playing 20 minutes. That's not great. I think that if Patty's going to play, Patty needs to have the ball more and shoot more. But anyway, it kind of worked in this game because the Hawks were hilariously, again, plus 17 in 8 minutes with Patty while he only took 1 shot, 2 rebounds, no assists, no turnovers, etc. I don't love the Patty Mills minutes. I do think that, the best justification or maybe the thought process, again, we're not going to ever probably get the actual thought process shared with us because Quinn doesn't like to answer those kind of questions directly. I think they wanted Patty to kind of get out there, move the ball, maybe play a little bit of, active on-ball defense. He's not a good defender, but he is active when he's out there in short spurts. And also Patty gets guarded, which I think is something that I should at least point out and talking to people behind the scenes, kind of talking about this, reminding me of this. I still would play Trent Forrest if they were going to have Patty used in this role that they are using him in, because Trent's such a better defender. But Trent doesn't get guarded like Patty, and that's at least notable to point out. I still think that hopefully they will go elsewhere with those minutes or if they're going to play Patty, have Patty do a little bit more offense because that's his actual strength on the floor. But anyway, it worked in this game. Garrison Matthews, same kind of story. 14 minutes for Garrison. I understand playing Garrison more because Garrison is a little bit bigger, better defender than Patty, and also gets guarded too. And I think that compared to Wes Matthews, Wes is so much better on defense than Garrison, but offensively, it's night and day as well. But another issue, like I pointed out this a couple times already this year, once with Sadiq Bey early in the year, he's become more aggressive since then. Garrison Matthews should not be playing 14 minutes and shooting 0 times. He's getting guarded pretty aggressively, but he's got to shoot the ball. I don't know what the deal is there, but anyway, +4 for Garrison. No attempts, again, 1 assist, 2 rebounds. Had a block. There you go. Anyway, that's kind of it for the low volume guys. Bruno Fernando put 15 minutes. Bruno will have better days. He was not very good in this game, and that was I've long championed Bruno as a very good third center and a acceptable second center on a team. Obviously, he's the third guy on the Hawks right now. He was not very good in this game. He did not score, which is fine, but three rebounds, 2 assists, 1 steal, 1 turnover, 4 fouls, and some iffy defense, I will say. He'll have better nights. He was really good in his last time he played when Capella or Kongwu had been out, but not a huge endorsement of this particular performance from Bruno. And it's so funny because the Hawks, all their bench were in the plus-minus positive, and like none of them played well. Bogey was not good in this game, although Bogey was a game best plus 24, which is funny. So on one hand, Bogey took 19 shots in 27 minutes, which is okay. I'm okay with Bogey launching. He was 4 of 11 on 2, which is not great, 1 of 8 from 3. So he was 5 of 19 from the floor. That's going to be tough to overcome. Had 12 points. I thought Bogey looked a little bit slow in this game. And I pointed this out before, but Bogey's playing a lot of minutes right now. Tonight he didn't, this afternoon he didn't. 27's okay for him. But he had been averaging 33 minutes a game over a 9-game sample. And while Bogey earned that time by playing fantastic basketball, and Jalen was out for some of that time, Jalen and DeAndre were out for some of that time, that's why. But I think the Hawks need to keep an eye on Bogey's minutes, just a little bit. I know that I am one to always say this too. The Hawks are at their best with Bogey, playing well and being on full systems go. But I think that Bogey's got long-term issues with his knees, etc. He's an older guy. I don't think that maybe he is the freshest that he's ever been. Based on, again, it's one game, it's an afternoon game. I'm not going to put too much stock in it. He didn't look very spry today, so keep an eye on him. Hopefully the Hawks will be able to kind of energize him in the next few days. But I thought he gave him kind of similarly to what I was talking about with Patty and Garrison earlier. Bogey is even a supercharged version of this. Bogey gets guarded like he is an elite shooter because he is an elite shooter. So him being on the floor, despite missing shots, does help the offense, which I think is notable. From there, the stars were all pretty good, I thought, actually, despite some ugly plus-minus numbers. Some of that's just the first few minutes of the game where they got bludgeoned together. We'll start with Saddiq Bey, who's probably the quietest in this one. 11 points, 11 rebounds, though, for Saddiq. A couple of big shots, I thought, late. Did miss the free throws at the very end of the game. He was over 2 in that last stretch, but I thought he gave them pretty good minutes. Defensively, he was competitive in this one. Clint Capella, 11 points, 17 rebounds to be number one on the floor for either side in this one. Had a steal and a block as well. Missed some buddies around the rim, as he is wont to do. I think at least 2 of those were like shot clock keys where he had to take them, and they both got blocked. He also, after that massive run of free throw success, he was 1 of 4 tonight. So I thought Clint was just fine. He was pretty good. He was not terrible by any means. I thought he did pretty well in this game, but wasn't excellent either. Jalen had a weird game in that he had a career high 24 points. I think he actually had his second most rebounds ever with 13. His career high actually was on Friday against the Kings. Had 4 assists. It was one of his better offensive games of his career. I think the first half tonight was probably the best half of his career offensively. I don't think I've seen him play this poorly defensively like all year long, honestly. And I don't mean to say that to pick him apart because I'm obviously very high on Jalen. I've been very high on Jalen, and Quinn continues to kind of be unabashed with just pointing out like how much they've missed Jalen when he was been out there, and I certainly agree with that. Jalen has been really important for them on offense and defense. But he had and watching the game back in particular on film, there were a lot of defensive mistakes, it seemed like, from Jalen. Kind of just weird plays. It's one game, who cares? But I think that it was weird how good he was on offense, how effective he was, how dynamic he was, how efficient he was on offense. And then defensively, it was like maybe his worst game that I've seen this year. So there you go. And by the way, that's not because Kyle Kuzma had 38 points. I don't really care about that. Kuzma was launching. He took 31 shots. So the point total there, whatever. But I thought Jalen could have been better defensively. But he was awesome on offense, and that was a key part of the Hawks winning this game, despite being minus 13 in this one for Jalen. And in the backcourt, Dejounte, a bounce-back game. I've chronicled this a lot, talked about it a lot on Friday. Dejounte's second halves have been kind of a disaster, like all year long, especially in this latest run of losses for the Hawks, but he was good the entire game tonight. 32 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, 1 turnover. The passing is never going to be fantastic, but he made simple plays for the most part, got downhill for the most part. He had one stretch in the first half where he was kind of going at Daniel Gafford, which is not going to be a success for Dejounte, but once he stopped doing that, it was better. And again, 15 points in the second half, 32 for the game. Good night from Dejounte, good efficient performance from him, and a nice bounce back all the way around. And then Trey ended up with 40 points, 13 assists, 3 steals. He was minus 13. Trey actually, as funny as this was, Trey was not incredible despite having 40 and 13. He played pretty well. 7 of 11 on 2s, 4 of 8 from 3. So he shot the ball pretty well. Missed 5 free throws, but also got to the line 19 times, so that's very helpful. Defensively, meh. But I thought that Trey and Dejounte, again, 72 points combined from your guards, pretty good. And that allowed the Hawks to sneak out of there with a victory if they badly needed. One more news item, actually, before we get out of here on this Sunday afternoon into Monday, New Year's Eve show. The Hawks announced over the weekend that 10 of their games coming up are going to be broadcast on Peachtree TV locally. And by the way, if you missed this or if you've been under a rock or a new resident of Atlanta, that's an over-the-air network, so non-cable in the area. That's part of a carve-out in the agreement now that the NBA has with Diamond Sports Group, which owns Bally Sports Southeast. NBA teams are able now to put up to 10 games over the air this season, with the entire contract structure about to change probably at the end of the season, but that's a different podcast for a different day. This is the first time the Hawks are going to be on Peachtree TV since I was a kid, like almost 30 years ago. It's been a long time. 9 of the 10 games that are being broadcast by Peachtree TV are going to be on Friday nights, beginning with January 12th is the first one, so coming up pretty soon in the next couple of weeks. The only game that's not on a Friday is March 8th is a Friday night game against Memphis. That will not be on Peachtree TV, but March 10th will be against New Orleans. Anyway, I am told, by the way, a key piece of intel here, Bally is not going to have these games. So if you're in the local market, you have to find an option to watch Peachtree TV. Obviously, that could be Antenna. This is an over-the-air network, but Bally will not have these games locally. If you're a non-Atlanta person watching on League Pass, nothing changes, so don't worry about that. And by the way, the Bally crew is doing the game. So it's going to be Bob and Neek and Tabitha on the call, just not on Bally Sports Southeast. Just one more time, not on Bally on these games. Also, the first 2 of these, January 12th and January 19th, are going to be on CBS locally in Atlanta because the same company owns the CBS channel in Atlanta as owns Peachtree TV. So 2 games on CBS for the Hawks, locally only. This is not a national thing, but a local only performance there. So there you go. That's just from the weekend and some planning if you have to find a way to watch Peachtree TV in the coming days. All right. With all that said, we'll get out of here on this Sunday into Monday, the end of the year, our final show of the year. The Hawks are now 13-19 this season. Obviously, no one loves that around Atlanta, but they are solid enough on the road. And then now they have a bunch of home games coming up in January, a busy schedule there. We'll have more on that in the future. The next game is going to be on Wednesday at home, yes, but against a very, very good Thunder team. So a real challenge there on Wednesday, but crucially, a couple of days off / to prepare for that game. Maybe a practice or 2 in there for the Hawks, given that the early game today and the holiday, sort of a TBD there. But all that said, we'll have wall-to-wall coverage of this team as always going into 2024. I didn't do a count of episodes, but I am confident I recorded more than 200 this year, as I basically always do. So please subscribe to this podcast. There's lots to catch up on. If you are a new listener, welcome aboard to the show, and please follow us across podcast platforms, I should say. Apple, Spotify, Overcast, Google Podcasts, all those places. You can go ahead and auto-download. That will definitely help the podcast as well. Follow us across multiple platforms. If you are a YouTube watcher, I definitely appreciate that. Like and subscribe there, but also maybe click the download button on the audio side to support the show in the best possible way. Follow the show on Twitter /X as well, at BT Rowland for my personal account, as well as at Locked On Hawks for the show. Also, my written work on the Hawks is at patreon.com/BT Rowland as well. I very much appreciate everyone for checking out the show this year and hopefully into next year as well. Please be safe the rest of this weekend. Please stay tuned for future coverage of the Hawks in this space. Enjoy your New Year's, and we'll see you all next time.